Welcome to the Education Insights Focus on Behavior podcast. We're here to talk about all things behavior in the world of education. We take the science of behavior and break it down for educators into easily implementable steps, and we're excited to spend some time with you. Get ready to talk through behavior, what works, what doesn't work, and how we can all improve our work in schools so we as educators can be more fulfilled and our students can be more successful.
Welcome to Education Insights Focus on Behavior. I'm your host, Dr. Selena Layden, and I am joined today by Daniel Irwin. Hi, Daniel.
Hello.
And Dr. Daria Lorio Barston. Hi, Daria.
Hi, everyone.
And in the background, we have Emily Muse. Hi, Emily.
Hello there.
Emily, our producer, always keeps us on task, so important job. So I want to start today with a conversation about engagement. So I thought it might be kind of fun to talk about some assignments either that we've given, that we've seen, that we've experienced, that we felt were particularly engaging.
Selena, I am happy to jump in because I feel like my kiddo has been really lucky, and I'm very thankful to have had a lot of really fantastic teachers who prioritize engagement. So currently, he has been working for class on a podcast, clearly because they were inspired by this very podcast.
I'm sure they all listen to it every day.
Right. Of course, right? Morning meeting, everyone. But really, they were doing a podcast that was connected to what they're learning in social studies, and they had to do some perspective taking of different people. And I thought that was really cool. And he was very much engaged because he had an opportunity to choose a partner. He had an opportunity to define a lot of things, how he wanted to represent them. And so I think that voice and choice embedded in an assignment that wasn't sit down and, write down in your journal, really spoke to him. Now, I don't know if everybody else in his class was as engaged as he was, but I certainly know that for him, that was quite a lovely fit.
First of all, Selena and Emily were both muted, and I think everybody needs to know this. They sneezed at the same time, and my engagement peaked when that happened because they are not close to each other in proximity, and that got me dialed in. Bless you both. One of the things that stands out to me from my daughter's experience is she was on the yearbook one year. That was part of her class, and you learn stuff about what things are as a parent that, like, I never participated in the yearbook. I have a yearbook. But one of the things she was really engaged with and I knew she was engaged with because she'd come home and talk about the experience she had of, like, either interviewing students or having to proof the text that was going with pictures or taking the pictures and that kind of thing. And it gave her the assignment, or sort of the whole idea of putting together a yearbook, provided her with a lot of instruction and learning about something that was pretty novel to her. She writes well, she reads well, she enjoys those things. But the whole process of working together and sort of working through this long-term project with a really everybody's going to see this outcome kind of thing, I think really got her engaged and got her really thinking about how to do it in a way that they were capturing ideas and thoughts from a variety of people. They were covering different activities and that kind of thing. And it was about leadership. It was all these kind of different components that were part of this big, I mean, it's project-based learning, right? Like we're ending with this thing, we're working as a team. So that's one that sticks out to me as something that really she continued to think about and process and plan for outside of sort of the classroom or that, hour and a half a day that she was spending in yearbook. It was really something that she internalized, for lack of a better word, but, like, just really wanted to keep working on and was really motivated by.
That's awesome. And I think that is, for me, kind of a sign of engagement when my kids are, well, first of all, if my kids even tell me about it, because let's be honest, how many times do you kids come home and say, how was school? It was fine. What'd you do today? Nothing. So if my kids tell me about it, I know that it was important to them. My oldest just had an assignment in school where they've been studying states of matter and some other stuff. And so they did this experiment with eggs where they put eggs in these cups and filled them with vinegar and water and milk. And then they left them over the weekend, and they were supposed to make hypotheses about what was going to happen. And My oldest talked about this all weekend. Like he was very excited to get back on Monday to see what happened to those eggs. And spoiler alert, he told me that the vinegar one made the egg kind of disintegrate. When they touched it, it just kind of fell apart. But nothing happened to the water one. And then the milk one, apparently, when they opened it up, it did not smell very good. So fun times. But I thought of another one that I saw. I used to have a teacher that would do that I always thought was so cool. So it was in a classroom with a lot of kids with autism who struggle with kind of understanding humor and perspectives. And so every day for their morning meeting, they would take the newspaper out, they would pull out the comics section. Each kid got to pick a comic, and then they would read it together, and then they would analyze, like, why is that funny? And the kids really looked forward to this every day. And I always thought that was such a cool assignment. It took them like 10 minutes. It wasn't like a long thing that they would do, but they looked forward to it every day. It got to be like whoever got to go get the newspaper, that was the exciting part. So that it was very cool to see them do it. And I thought, what a great skill to work on that these kids need a need a little more support with. So
Selena, if I can add one more, there's one example that comes from elementary school, and that really has resonated with my kiddo and has really stuck in my mind, has been when his teacher for homework actually offered a menu of choices. And the menu of choices looked like a little bingo card, and you had to pick however you wanted to complete your bingo. And it had activities such as talk to an adult about what you learned in school this week, read a story out loud to someone who would enjoy it, look out your window with someone close by, see what things that you can notice. And I thought that was such a beautiful assignment because it's getting to that pretty authentic engagement and actually interacting with others. And so I thought, not only are we still processing information that we have learned in class, hopefully, but we are also making those connections, and we are really kind of upping that family engagement as well. And so that is something that I have absolutely loved. I recognize that this particular teacher put a lot of effort and a lot of time into designing these menu boards, but I thought the payout was just fantastic.
well, I think that brings us to our topic for today. And if you haven't already guessed, we are interested in engagement today. So I want to start out by talking about, first of all, what is student engagement? And then delve into why is it important? And I think both those questions seem self-evident, but I think they are worth talking a little bit about and taking a deeper dive. So what is student engagement?
I think from a behavior standpoint, it's we can look at a number of different things, right? So depending on the students we're working with, what are the behaviors that are indicating engagement to us from a very kind of surface level, right? So completing assignments, interacting with people, like sort of doing the requirements and getting things done. Learning from a deeper level, I think we have to kind of look at the source of reinforcement when students are engaged, right? So there's this idea that um, the students are engaged because they want to get good grades, because they want to, be teacher pleasers, because the sooner I'm done, the sooner I get to go do the fun thing. There's all these different levels and kind of reasons kids want to get things done. I think from an engagement level, kind of like we talked about in the opener, there's a deeper level that there's this idea that this information that I'm learning, this activity that I'm doing is going to benefit me later, that is something I'll be able to use, that's applicable to my life. And because of that, I am more likely to be able to kind of work through what may be difficult or be excited about a discovery or something I've learned or some aspect or the entire, activity, assignment, whatever. So I think it's two different things, not two different things. It's all sort of under the same boat. And I think you can look at kids who do the work and kind of get it done and da 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 da. This is all part of the process. And then those who the engagement sort of sets it up or tees it up for another level of understanding and application and genuine sort of learning and discovery. I don't know if that's right, but it feels good. It feels good to say that. It feels right to me.
Daniel, I love it. I think you're right as far as I think it's all the things, right? I think for true engagement, students have to find meaning in it outside of we're doing this because our teacher told us to, or we're doing this to get a good grade, or whatever those things are. I think they have to have that personal connection that then becomes the driving force for them to persevere, even when things get a little dicey, even when challenges and difficulties arise, because they have that buy-in that feels on a deeper level to them, right? And so I think that's kind of what we think about engagement. And I can't think or talk about engagement without thinking about Schlechty's work. And if you're not familiar, Schlechte puts engagement kind of into two buckets, right? You have two axes. One is attention and one is commitment. So attention is how much attention is the student actually giving or not giving the assignment, and the other aspect of that is how much are they really committed to completing the task. And so based on whether you have low attention, low commitment, that's when we have kids who are rebelling, not necessarily in the very outward manner, but sometimes they are engaged, just not in the assignment that was provided, right? They might be engaged in talking to the peer or engaged in putting their head down, or kind of avoiding work altogether. Whereas as we're increasing that commitment or that attention, we are moving more into that level of engagement. I think it's also important for us to think about that sometimes we have kiddos who give us full attention, but they don't have that commitment. And that's the land of compliance, right? And so I think sometimes when we go and we collect data on student engagement, I think this is, at least for me, this is always a challenge that I wrestle with is what I'm looking at. Am I seeing ritualistic compliance or am I seeing authentic engagement? And I think those two things are very different.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, Daria. I know that I've been in classrooms t at times where students look engaged, like all the behaviors appear to be correct, right? Students are where they're supposed to be, they're doing their assignment. But when I talk to the student and I say, "Hey, what are you learning about?" And they say, "I don't know." That always concerns me because then I think to your point, like we're doing what the teacher told us to do, but we don't understand necessarily the intent, the purpose, the outcome that we're hoping to get out of this.
Yeah, and Selena, to that question, I always wonder how would kids answer it if we ask them the follow-up question to that, which is, and why are we learning it? Right? Because I think kids can tell you this is what we're learning because sometimes they're used to lots of adults coming into the classroom, administrators and the instructional coaches and all the wonderful folks who support teaching and learning. But I think sometimes they can't tell you why it's important. And I think that's a really essential piece. And I know that not everything, not every content area, not every lesson is gonna um, connect to students on a personal level, but I think it's our job to try to make it as engaging as possible. And I think one way to do that is really to leverage the choice and the voice and give them an opportunity to own that learning more than we sometimes do.
Yeah, and I think trying to be explicit about purpose, right? Which goes beyond writing the content standard on the board. I think the original intent of like write your content standard on the board came from this will help students understand why they're supposed to be learning it. I don't know that that translated into practice in the way that we hoped. And so making those purposeful efforts to say, for example, my oldest was learning long division last year. I have to tell you, it did not go well in our house. He could not understand why on the earth you would ever need to use long division in your life. I don't know that I have the greatest answer for him as to why you would ever need to use long division in your life. But what he was actually really struggling with was what to do with that remainder because it didn't make sense to him why you would have this remainder. And so I just finally was like, look, later, you're going to learn that this remainder turns into a decimal, a fraction, whatever. And all of a sudden he was like, oh, so you do something with it. Yes, you do. We're just not there yet. So then that helped us a little bit get through it. Long division was never his favorite. It still is not. And understandably so, perhaps.
Yeah, it might be the worst.
I
Also,
think it is.
you've got 39 pizzas. Each pizza has 8 slices, and you're having 14 people over for lunch.
Our listeners are now turning off the podcast.
But
Listen,
here's the thing. Who gets the extra slices? I don't know if there are extra slices. I didn't actually do this math, but who gets the extra slices? And so then you're having a conversation about needs and equity, and you're having a conversation about social skills. Like, do you go up and take the remaining 8 slices? Right? Anyway, pizza brings everybody together. And I think, Daria, to come back to your point about sort of that the compliance versus the engagement, it, are there good measures out there for really and truly kind of gauging engagement? Because I think obviously there's like a continuum and a spectrum, right? All the way from the bottom where we're not committed, we're not engaged, or not attending to high engagement, and that like I'm really interested in the line between strategic compliance, where there's high attention and there's low commitment, because grades are sometimes the thing. I want to get the 4.0 GPA, the 4.7 GPA, right? Like that's my outcome, and I'm attending and I'm doing the work and I'm meeting the mark to reach that outcome. But is that like, where does commitment kind of draw into that, as far as that persistence or the application or the generality of the learning, or thinking about how this is actually going to benefit them beyond the grade? I'm really interested in that kind
yeah,
of
so
spectrum.
isn't that a doozy of a question, Daniel, right? Isn't that a great question for us to be asking as we're thinking about collecting data? And I think you already suspect you know my answer, and my answer is going to be ask the kids, interview the kids, right? Ask them that very question of why. Hey, why is this important? And if they are telling you because I need to graduate from high school, I need to go to a good school, I need to have a good life, all of those things are great, but that sounds a little bit more of that strategic compliance piece, right? Other than because this is really exciting, because this is something that I've been interested in for a while, or because I can't wait to see how this is going to turn out, or isn't this great? Right? I think sometimes we need to think about how do we design activities that actually foster kids' innate curiosity. Um, and I think that's a really important part of that student engagement piece.
So I'm going to throw out another question. I think that's tangentially related to this. I think as teachers, we try to design the best lessons we can, right? And we go into them and we think they're going to be great. And then sometimes they're not as great as we thought that they were going to be. And I just want to say this happens to everybody at every level. It happens to me when I teach my university students sometimes. Like, I think we're going to have this great lecture, and I'm in the middle of it going, how did we get here? So, what are some considerations that we can give folks for maybe think through these pieces, or how can we reflect on our lessons to ensure they're as engaging as possible?
So I agree, Selena. We do a lot of PD, and some of it's face to face, some of it's virtual. And I think every time, right, there's something to reflect on and think about, okay, where did I lose them? How do we get off track? Nothing ever goes perfectly. Things go well. Anyway, there's always that piece of reflection. And I think the first thing that I want to consider if I'm thinking about that is the access, right? Am I giving the information, and do students have the tools that they need to be able to access what I'm saying, right? So we're thinking about IEPs, we're thinking about accommodations, we're thinking about assistive technology and universal design, and really setting a foundation there to make sure that they can access it. Because if they can't, then there goes your attention, right?
And
And
I
so
just
from
want
a
to add
very,
one thing to that,
yeah,
Daniel, because I agree with you. But I don't think it's always just some of those things. Sometimes I think we're not very clear in what we're actually asking people to do. We think we might be, but if you give directions and everyone's staring at you like deer in headlights, they don't know what you asked them to do. And I've been on the receiving end of that too.
I
Like,
think that's a part two, right?
sorry, go
So
ahead.
we're making sure you, I was getting to my 7 point thesis. I'm just kidding. But so foundationally, are we giving information and providing ways for people to provide knowledge, information back to us in a way that works for everybody? Two is exactly what you said, right? Which is whatever you just said. What did you just say?
I was talking about how people have to understand what you're actually wanting them to do.
Yeah, okay. Part two is making sure that people understand what you said, right? That you want them to do. And so in the as we're talking about sort of managing classrooms, right? From a bigger standpoint, if we're thinking about OBM, we've got to have clear expectations. And if people aren't clear on those expectations, whether it's a co-teacher, whether it's an IA, a speech, like whoever's kind of in the classroom supporting kids and the kids themselves, if they don't know what the expectation is, it's going to be hard, very hard to get the buy-in um, for anything.
Yeah, so Daniel, I'm really glad that you brought up, well, really all of the points. But I think that it's really important for us to hang out here a little bit talking about UDL and talk about the Universal Design for Learning. And I'm hoping that we can link some resources in the show notes. Hint, hint, dear Emily. Because I think talking about Universal Design for Learning and starting by building lessons grounded in that gives us a really, really strong chance that we are going to make sure that everybody can not only access the lessons, but also meaningfully participate in them, right? And I think access and actual participation are not necessarily the same thing. And so, to Selena's point about making sure that we have clear directions, and to Daniel's point about making sure we have the accommodations in place, all of those things have to work together. I think the other piece that I think about, and sometimes I just reflect on my own practices and giggle in my head and think, silly me, what was I thinking? I distinctly remember one lecture that I gave, and I was so proud of it because I made so many connections to Ted Lasso, which is a phenomenal show. Everybody should watch it. And this was right during the peak when I thought everybody was watching it. And it's true, everybody was watching it except for the students that I was teaching that semester. And so finally, somebody raised their hand and they said, hey, professor, this is great. We're really curious about this show now, but just FYI, we don't know what it is. And so I thought, oh no, I was today many years old when I fell into that trap of designing a lesson that I thought would be engaging and kind of based on my interest as opposed to what my students were into and making it connect to that, right? And so I think a big piece of that is actually asking our students and having those, we're having a full circle moment here of building those relationships, of knowing what they're into and what they care about, and helping connect and build lessons around those interests as opposed to things that we think might be fun or we think might be cute, or maybe we saw somewhere on somebody's reel on social media and now we think, oh, that was a great idea. I should do that too.
So that's where pizza comes back in.
Full circle.
Pizza is a circle. Um, and I think more and more there's been a few years ago, there's a lot of discussion, even at the Department of Ed, around how can we do these authentic assessments to gauge student learning, right? And using problem-based assessments or project-based learning, these kinds of things where there is a lot of student choice around impacting things in your community. Here's the problem in your community. How are you going to fix it? Right. And getting people engaged and really thinking about things that are real to them. And then that builds the context for skill development and practice and feedback and all those little things that build into it. But building sort of that short-term context, even if it's semi-made up, can help really paint a bigger picture and keep kids engaged and doing things that they then start to see the bigger impact of knowing how to do these things, knowing how to apply academic skills in those situations.
Yeah, and I also think about when I design lessons or when I design lessons or when I plan my lectures, I try to be mindful of the question of who is owning the learning here, right? And thinking about who's carrying that ownership and that load of truly learning. Because if that learning is completely directed by me, then I don't know that it is going to be as engaging to students than if that learning is being carried by them. Right. And so I think there are lots of different ways to do that. I think one way is to make sure that we are increasing opportunities for students to respond throughout the lesson or throughout the lecture or, whatever grade level, whatever content you're teaching is making sure that they are having opportunities not to just have the sit and get that hopefully nobody's doing anymore, but to really participate in that lesson as well and have those opportunities to respond. And hopefully, those opportunities are not only frequent, but also deep, right? It's a little bit beyond, hey, thumbs up, thumbs down, are you still with me type of opportunity to respond. And that other piece is really thinking about who's actually working hardest at this moment.
And kind of, I think along the same lines, Daria, in thinking about a lot of the classrooms that I've supported with students with disabilities who are really starting to focus in on their post-secondary goals, and using community-based instruction to support those goals and moving towards achieving those post-secondary goals, that buy-in and understanding of, okay, what's happening in the classroom connects to what we're doing in the community, that connects to what you want to be able to do, and consistently drawing that connection out and saying this instruction here is going to help you budget, which is going to help you in the grocery store, which is going to help you when you're grown and you have income and you need to manage your money, right? Like, so it's all being very clearly sort of painted together that this very short-term thing is leading to a medium-term, long-term adult success.
I am going to add one quick thing there. I do remember being told by my teachers I had to learn how to add and subtract really well because I was never going to have a calculator in my pocket at all times. And I don't know, I'm just saying.
Well, it's true, but I do think that this point about helping kids make connections in general among content areas is really powerful, right? Because when you're learning one thing in isolation about whether they are the pizza slices for a math problem or whatever, right? It doesn't stick nearly as much as when you start seeing how this part in math connects to this part in social studies and this part in reading, and when things are beginning to kind of make sense at a bigger scale, I think that's a really important way to also help increase that commitment from the students.
Yeah, so I think that that kind of brings us to a nice pause point in this conversation. As we were planning for this, we kind of started talking about that we thought it might be really important to ask kids what they find engaging. So we decided we're going to do a part two on this episode and ask some kids what they think. So stay tuned for that. But before we leave you all today, we want to make sure that we talk about our unsolicited ads. Or our unpaid ads. So, Daria, I think you are doing our ad for the day.
It is. I am very excited about this resource, and it comes from a TTAC Center at William and Mary, where lots of fabulous people work. And so, shout out to that center, first of all. But in their brilliance, they have pulled together a document that is called Consideration Packet on Techniques for Active Learning. And I have used this resource for the last 10 years. It is filled with different activities for active engagement from students. And so some of them are going to be really pretty quick bites, and some of them are going to be a little bit deeper activities. But I really love having a variety of activities listed in one document that I can peruse and I can check and I can actually see what aligns to the purpose and the objective of my lesson, and figure out which activities might be a good match to help increase those opportunities to respond and to help increase that engagement.
Thanks, Daria. The other thing I wanted to put out there for our listeners is if you've had an activity that's worked really well for you and you want to share it with us, we would love to hear about it. And you can always email us at cebis@odu.edu. That's CEBIS@odu.edu. And we would love to hear from you. That said, I think that's the end of our episode today. So thank you to my co-host, Daniel.
Hey, thanks.
And Daria.
Thank you all.
And of course, to Emily, who will add lots of great things to the show notes for us all. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you.
And we will see you all on the next episode.
Thanks for listening to Education Insights Focus on Behavior. We hope you enjoyed the conversation, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can join the conversation by emailing us at cebis@odu.edu, visiting www.cebisva.org, or following us on Facebook, Instagram, X, or Blue Sky at CebisVA. Special thanks to the Virginia Department of Education for their support of this project.